Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hacker Factory podcast. I'm your host, the hacker maker, Phillip Wylie. And each episode I have a unique guest with a story of how they got started in the cybersecurity industry. And I'm really excited about my guest today, Jay Davey. He's very passionate about helping others. He's a security practitioner, lots of great experience, very highly skilled person, but one of his passions is helping other people. So this is just one of the goals of the show is to help people get started. And couldn't pick a better guest to be on the show. So welcome to the show, JJ.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for the very warm welcome. So I think I'll go ahead and just give a quick overview of basically myself and my journey into cybersecurity and maybe touch on a bit about the struggles that I've had getting into the industry. So I started my actual technology journey in the UK Armed Forces as a communication systems operator. That's basically using satellites, computer networks, very old school stuff, not like the Cisco stuff that you see today. It's very old school kind of army ruggedized kit. So that's where I got exposed to my first bit of technology there. I grew a passion for it within the Armed Forces. After about 6 years, I left the Armed Forces and found a service desk role at Lockheed Martin. I was there for about a year and I found out it's not really for me. So I rashly just put my notice in and left that job, which was probably a risky decision at that point because I didn't have another job to go to. So I was there calling around different recruiters going, hey, have you got anything? Hey, have you got anything? And I got this one recruiter call me and said, hey, I've got this junior SOC role, but it's for a graduate. I said, I bet I could do it. I've looked at the job description. I think I can do it. So I was pretty much begging on my knees over the phone. And he said, right, I'll put you forward and see what they say. So he put me forward. I remember sitting there on the beach. There's a cold beach as well. I was sitting there, just kept phoning him, just looking at my phone, refreshing my emails, seeing if I got anything. And then picked up the phone and he's like, they want to interview you. And I was over the moon. But at this point, I didn't even know what Security Operations Center was. I didn't even know what cybersecurity was. I didn't even know it existed at that point. Got there, had the interview, passed the interview. I think I did well. I didn't get much feedback, but I must have did well because I got the job. I was there for about a year. I left there to join Carnival Cruise Line as their tier 2 analyst, which was a really, really good industry to be in. I was really exposed to a different mode of operating for a Security Operations Center because they have cruise ships. So it was a very unique challenge to be able to provide cybersecurity for essentially what's a floating city. So that was really unique challenge. Unfortunately, COVID hit and I was then jobless because they had to downsize the company in terms of their number of employees. Then moved to a fintech as a pen tester for 6 months just to try and tie me over. Really good experience. Let me see the kind of pen testing side of cybersecurity, which a lot of people are probably going to get shocked, but I didn't actually enjoy the pen testing side of it. I think it was more the report writing that kind of made me a bit tired. So I found a Security Operations Center tier 2 role at CyberClan, which I'm currently at the moment. Enjoyed it, got promoted to UK lead, and I'm still here currently. The challenges I've had during my time here was that actually I didn't have any certifications when I first went for that role, for my junior role. And that made it incredibly difficult because there was no way for them to validate my skills. They had nothing to give them that assurance that I possessed a baseline level of skills, which is what most employers do. So for me, it was a case of telling them and persuading them and articulating what I knew to them. And the challenge is trying to get someone to listen. So talking to that recruiter, making sure that they can hear you properly about what you actually have and what you can bring. And one of the biggest thing that I found was passion. passion always speaks volumes for the person trying to go for that role. If you can't get across that passion, then all these certifications probably are worthless, because that passion is normally equates to a cultural fit, and that cultural fit normally outweighs certifications. But that depends on the role you're going for. One of the other challenges was trying to learn everything too quickly. There was so much to learn, and when I went into the Security Operations Center role, I realized I have so much to learn. I know absolutely nothing. So I was there learning networking, security plus, all at the same time. I was learning malware analysis, and I remember going to bed. I was pretty healthy. I was like 24 years old. I should have been fit as a fiddle, healthy, but I was going to bed at like 6 o'clock at night because I was knackered from all the studying, and I was just so tired, and it just wasn't sustainable. It's such a challenge. If I could go back to my younger self and shake him and say, "Hey, take your time. You're going to fail and make mistakes along the way. Just take your time and take it in your strides." I would do that. I would shake him and give him a little slap and say, "Take it a day at a time. Don't learn everything at once." Because I remember going onto Amazon, spending £100 on books, and it took me months to get through each book. I thought, just buy one book at a time instead of buying the whole stack. And that was one of my biggest challenges. But ultimately, the journey has been fantastic. I met some really good people along the way that have helped me become who I am today. I have a big following on LinkedIn, but for me, it's not about that kind of vanity metric. For me, that number is the number of people I could potentially have a positive impact on. So how many people I can positively help benefit their lives, how I can build them up. That's what I do with my content. So a lot of my content isn't about, making myself feel good. It's about what can I tell the people that could help them improve themselves and make themselves a better version than they are today, tomorrow.
Very interesting story. And that is one thing for our listeners as you're trying to get started. If you've got someone else that can share their experience with you, it can save you a lot of time. That's why mentors are important, because, when you're getting started trying to learn, you don't always know what the best learning resources are. You don't know what the best certifications are. If you need certifications and all this, so if you can learn from someone else, that can definitely save you a lot of time. And so before, I want to make sure we cover this, and since you're so passionate about helping others, why don't you share about your project with our listeners?
Yeah, so last year, there's probably little bits of talks and some adverts around there for Cyber Mentor Dojo. That was actually a bit of a trial that we was doing. So we had this idea, and I say we, one of my friends, David Tyler, we had this idea back in 2021 or 2020, I think it was. We had this idea that how could we connect mentors and mentees together? How could we make like a kind of LinkedIn for mentors and mentees in cybersecurity? And the brainchild of that was Cyber Mentor Dojo. However, there wasn't a lot of money involved. So we had to try and make it as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible. So there's lots of bugs in that platform, but ultimately it was a test to see if there was something really there in the market. Ultimately there was, so we thought, okay, brilliant, right, we need to make this, and we need to remake this, we need to make it better, we need to get rid of all the bugs, we need to streamline it so it's a complete intuitive process for both the mentor and the mentee. So last week we relaunched the platform, brand new application, and we've had some really good feedback so far. Essentially, what you do is you just sign up and say, "Hey, I'm a mentor," or "I'm a mentee," and that's it. You find your mentor, you find your mentees, and you start your journey. You connect to each other. The platform has video calls, it has inbuilt messaging, it has forums, it has knowledge base, and it all comes from a big cost of free. There's no cost involved. So at no point during that journey are you going to be asked for your credit card. We do have some really good things in the pipeline that we are envisioning, that we're dreaming, but it's going to be very slow because at the moment we are trying to look for that kind of growth, and we're trying to look for that investment in us, because ultimately we're not getting any income at the moment from this, and we don't care, because the message is we want people to connect with each other. I had this dream that we could build this platform and we can connect people and remove titles from it and say, hey, we don't care if you're a CISO, if you're an analyst, or if you join in here, you're all human, you're helping each other. So if you've had 20 years of experience, help someone that's got no years experience. and just let them learn from your mistakes. Ideally, that's what mentoring is trying to help people go in the right direction, not teach them, but help them in the right direction. So yeah, Cyber Mentor Dojo is our platform of kind of hope to help people. So we're trying to push people just to go towards it. At the moment, it's been quite a heavy pace because we found lots of bugs that we've not seen before. So you have to go back, have to fix them, have to push out the updates, just try and make sure that we can catch these before they become a problem. Like most organizations, patching 0 days, it's one of those things that we just need to make sure that we're trying to make it as intuitive as possible, making sure people get the value from it. It's ultimately our major goal from this.
Yeah, I love the cause, and that's great that you're doing it for free, because I've seen some mentoring actually charge the mentees, and they say that it's to support the platform, but it's really good. I think if you're going to do a platform for mentoring, if it costs anything, then I would think you'd reach out to get donations from people to help do that, because when you're getting started out, you don't have that much money to pay for mentoring. As we talked about before we started recording, a lot of that money needs to be spent on your education or certifications. So having that money to pay for a mentor is really going to limit a lot of people from having mentors, and some people would be totally counted out.
Yeah, exactly. And talk about certifications, because that's another hot topic when you're trying to break into the industry, and it's on the forefront of everyone's mind. It's on the tip of the tongue of almost everyone. Is certifications actually really worth it? The answer is, it depends. And I know that's not really a good answer, but it depends. And I'll just go into it a little bit more. Certifications are, for some companies, a legal requirement. So they have insurance that they need to hire competent professionals that are certified because their insurance requires it. Some companies don't have that, so they can have that luxury of hiring talent that don't have certifications. So for some companies, they do require their cybersecurity professionals that are managing their risk to be certified to an expected standard based on their insurance for legality purposes. Other companies use it as a kind of a baseline to say, hey, they must know networking because they've achieved Network Plus, so they must have an element of networking knowledge. It's a baseline for them. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's a baseline for them. Because a lot of companies get thousands and thousands of people apply for their roles. They have no way to go ahead and go into all their LinkedIns and go to their blogs and all their YouTube channels to see what they've done. They need a very quick-fire method of saying what their potential level is, and that is, unfortunately, certifications. On the other hand, if you use LinkedIn correctly and you network within the industry correctly, you could probably bypass that whole requirements for certification by getting into good conversations with hiring managers, with recruiters, just to see how passionate you really are, putting out articles, blogs, videos, whatever you need to do to create content to brand yourself as a professional is ultimately going to give you a better statistical chance of getting that yes that you really need. I've seen people that have just done Try Hack Me, and they put their Try Hack Me certifications, or they've done Hack the Box, or whatever it may be, and they're talking about it, they're putting their experiences on there, and they're finding roles without certifications, and then they get certifications. But unfortunately, they are going to be around here to stay for a while, and that's purely the nature of the beast. And insurance companies are driving that requirement for these certifications, and big certifying bodies are getting involved. There's a legal legislation just come out in the United Kingdom. Well, it's not really just come out. It's going to come out. It's in a kind of request for comment stage at the moment. But it requires certain businesses in the public sector to hire cybersecurity professionals that have a certain level of standard, and that's gauged by certifications. So that's going to make the requirement stay around for a long period of time. So when we go back to the learner, they do have a limited amount of money. We all do, but the learner less so. And so they're going to be looking for that quick win, which is normally a CompTIA certification or something like EJPT or something like that. They're going to look for that quick win because that's all they can afford. So that's when platforms like Cyber Mentor Dojo said, right, we can't take money from the learner because that needs to go to something that is going to get them into that role. That certification is going to increase that chance. Being on our platform isn't going to increase their chance. It's going to help, but it's not going to increase that statistical chance. They're going to build that network connection, but they're not going to get that piece of paper that's going to sit on their LinkedIn profile or sit on their resume or CV to give them that statistical chance of getting into that role. So ultimately, we just needed to make that as cheap as possible. We said, we're free. Let's keep it at that.
Yeah, that's great. And we were talking about certifications. Are there any particular certifications that you'd recommend for SOC?
So, security operation analysts, it really depends on the environment. But if we talk from a general perspective, I would say you need to have a good understanding of networking, how systems talk to each other, how to diagnose networking problems, how threats can materialize on a network. That's really good knowledge to have. So something like Network Plus is going to give you a good understanding of that. I like to recommend CCNA. Even though it's a vendor certification, it does go very deep into networking concepts and constructs, and it can give you a really good understanding of networking. Then you have stuff like your Security Plus or your SSCP that's going to introduce you to the security concepts and constructs at the foundational level. Go cloud, get a cloud certification, AWS, GCP, Azure, whatever it may be, get a cloud certification just to understand the concept of cloud and how businesses use it. For understanding threats and diagnosing threats and looking at malware and breaking down malware and incident response, I always suggest Blue Team Level 1 by Security Blue Team. It's a comprehensive Blue Team or Security Defender certification that covers everything from mental health to malware analysis to incident response to phishing analysis. It covers everything. It's very verbose in terms of the content that you get from it. If you get those, you're a solid candidate for a good security role. If you're at a stage where you're just about to break into that senior kind of level, I would start looking at certifications such as CISM or CISA. It's going to give you an understanding about how the business sees security. And when you start going to those senior levels, you're going to be that translator, that person that can translate the technical and security stuff to the business. So the business can understand what they're listening to. Normally we talk in the language of risk, maybe mainly financial risk. So what's the financial risk of this alert? And if you can communicate stuff like that to maybe your boss or your boss's boss, there's a better chance you're going to have a better relationship with those seniors and other departments as well. And if you start learning stuff like that, you're going to become a very powerful analyst because you can talk to the business and you can talk to all the other different departments within the business. The problem with a lot of security professionals is they become very siloed in what they learn. So they don't think outside the box. They don't go and learn finance, or they don't go and learn legal. They don't learn about the challenges of HR. So they become very siloed and security becomes the center of the universe. So once you've learned the foundations and you're really good at being a tier 1 SOC analyst and you go into that tier 2 level, start thinking about learning everything else around outside of security. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to become a lawyer. You don't have to do anything like that. Just know that it exists and know how it impacts the business. So when you have to talk to the legal team, do you go, actually, legally a risk register is required because of X, Y, and Z. And they go, actually, you talk our language. You build relationships, you make it easier. So when stuff happens, so let's say a P1 happens, it's ransomware, it's going crazy, you can go ahead and you can go talk to them. You go, hey, look, me and you, we're friends, right? There's malware on your machine. Is it all right if I can just have a quick look at it? So you build that relationship up. So look at certifications that teach you the business and all the different facets so you can translate it to the business. The last thing you want to do is go, hey, do you know what? One day I want to be a manager. And you go onto a call and all you can do is talk in ones and zeros, IP addresses, IOCs, and everyone in the call is just going, what are you talking about? I can't understand you. So learning stuff like that is really important as well. One of the things that I like to look at as well is learning about the different regulatory compliance standards that are out there. So different regulatory standards that are out there. So what may impact your business that you're looking at. So when you look at an alert, you can gauge the impact properly. So let's just say there's a machine that's been breached that's in European Union or in Europe. It's subject to GDPR. So if it's got PII on, you're like, all right, okay, I know GDPR exists and I know that it does PII. That increases the impact of this alert. If you're not aware of those things, then it can really harm your ability to gauge the impact of something. So learning stuff like PCI DSS, GDPR, and all the different standards that may implicate some sort of impact to the organization, be aware of them. So go ahead and learn that. So not so much of a certification as much, but something that is probably important to be aware of.
Yeah, I like that. That's some good information. And as you mentioned, some of the business stuff, one of One of my former coworkers at a company where I was a red team lead, he had like a business degree, but it was just so amazing how valuable he was to the security organization because the CISO always came to him for slides to take to the board and take to some of the other executives in the other areas and some of the business people.
It's crazy. It's like all business leaders want to know, and I had this conversation before with somebody on a Discord channel, and it was a really good conversation because he said to me, my manager's just not listening to me. How can I make him listen? I said, well, first of all, what are you telling him? What's the question he's asking you, and what are you telling him? He said, oh, he wants to know how bad it is. I said, well, what are you telling him? I said, are you going on and on and on about problems, or are you giving him metrics and giving him short, sweet answers? And he said, yeah, I'll give him an hour talk. And I said, right, open up a Word document, get some metrics, and do short lines about each individual one and potential solutions, and then talk risk. And he went ahead and did that, sent the document, and he said, right, that had worked really well. We've had a good conversation. I said, look, he wants to know what's going wrong right now. He doesn't want to know about everything that's going wrong. He wants to know what's the major fire in the building. I said, imagine it's like a hotel and all the hotel rooms are on fire. He wants to know where the potential damage is to the structure of that hotel right now, and what do you need to put out first of all. And he's like, right, okay. So I said to him, if you could talk to him in a language that he's going to understand, he's probably going to listen to you. If not, he's probably going to ignore you. I said, you're going to get a paycheck at the end of every month, but you're probably not going to be worth something if you can't talk to him properly. So he started talking to him like that, and he's like, right, I've just booked myself on a CISM course because this stuff is amazing. I'm just like, it's crazy. As soon as you start speaking the right language, people start listening to you.
Yeah, that's some good, valuable advice, especially for someone just starting their journey. If they learn that piece early on, they're gonna get ahead sooner. So something I just kind of recently, experienced a couple years ago when I was interviewing for jobs is understanding the latest breaches and the things going on in the news from the cyber perspective. Do you feel like that's important? Do you think that's something that could be helpful when you're interviewing, that you understand the latest threats and breaches and so forth?
I think it's crucial because it shows them that, one, you're passionate, two, you're current. If you're current, then you can articulate your answers to interview questions to something more recent. So if you're talking about like Log4j and you're talking about different attacks like that, your answers are going to be more current. The worst thing you could do to go into an interview is give them an example of a ransomware attack and go, oh, back in 2017, there was a ransomware attack on the NHS, which was stopped by Marcus Hutchins. They're like, that was in 2017. Everything's evolved since then. We've got remote working en masse. There's new malware. There's new ransomware groups. They want to talk about something more recent. So keeping up with the news is not just really good from a threat intelligence perspective, but from an interview perspective, you can relate it to something fresh. Because I guarantee you that the person sitting opposite you or the person sitting on that Zoom call with you has probably read the article and can know exactly what you're talking about. They're probably not going to know about what happened 5 years ago. They're probably not going to care. They want to know about what's currently affecting their organization. So that sort of brings me on to another point. If you read that news article and the company you're interviewing with, and you can relate that potential impact to that company, they're probably going to like that. They're probably going to listen to that. So if you can say, hey, this Log4j attack, I've noticed that when I went to your website that you're using this version of Apache, it potentially, it could be a problem for you. And they'll be like, whoa. And you've just related that news article that's caused a £1 million breach and related it to us. That's fantastic. And if you start talking about, was it Stuxnet? No, they're probably not going to listen. They're probably going to be like, brilliant. You've read a Security Plus book. Well done. But who cares? That was ages ago. That's not going to infect us. We don't have industrial control systems. We're just a gaming company. So you've got to make sure that if you are going to use a news article, make sure it relates to them, or make sure that it is current and they've probably read it, because that's also good advice as well. Top tip: look at what industry the company is that you're interviewing with, and then look at cyber attacks around the industry and relate that to that interview.
That's very good points. And one of the things to keep in mind about those for our listeners is some of the security news and latest breaches and stuff. Sometimes that's the stuff that management or upper management is going to talk about. They may not be in the, deep into the technical side of things, but those are the things that they're seeing, understanding. That's the way you speak.
I remember Yeah, and that's really good that you mentioned that, because I remember when I was working in the SOC, and the British Airways got fined like something ridiculous, like 198 million or something like that, and they found out what happened, and they released a report about what happened. And I remember we got a report straight from the vice president going, "Does this affect us?" Literally an email straight into our mailbox going, "Does this affect us?" And then we were like, right, we need to scramble to find out. We need to quickly check all our payment card systems, make sure everything's okay. And then we had to quickly go back to them and say, no, it doesn't affect us. And all we got was a message going, "Thanks, sent from my phone." But they didn't read it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And some of the times that, your management reaches out to see if you're affected by those things or if this can be exploited or so forth. Sometimes that can be helpful and score some points for you, because I used to work for a bank, and I remember one time it was like the night before Thanksgiving, and we're actually getting things ready for lunch the next day. And I had a director send an email out and saying, I'm forgetting what the vulnerability was. He just sent out an email asking if it could be exploited or not. And out of the people on the team, no one responded, but I did. And that just, made a big difference for me there.
Yeah, that's really what you do. And I think a lot of people actually have a fear of senior management. I think there's like kind of especially if you like for me, you come from an armed forces background, you look at like senior management as like a higher rank. You're like, oh, probably don't want to annoy them, but at the end of the day, they're just humans and they need to know this information. It's imperative for the business that they find out this information.
Yeah, and it seems like once you've got those relationships with people management, it's going to help your career. You're going to go further. There's less anxiety dealing with them than if you just try to avoid it because you're scared.
Yeah, and you'll probably find out they're nice people.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting sometimes what you'll have in common with them. So are there any tips that we didn't discuss that you'd like to share with anyone on what would be helpful for them to get started?
So don't chase certifications, chase the knowledge around them. Certifications should be the byproduct of what you learn. So if you're there and you're studying and you're learning topics, you should naturally be able to pass the exams that are related to that topic, because you're studying for the knowledge as opposed to just ticking the right boxes. You should be able to look at a question like, right, I've studied that very well and I know that, and that's the answer. Instead of going, actually, I remember that. You don't want to get to the point where you remember the answer. You want to know the answer. There's a big difference. Remembering and knowing is a big difference. So make sure that when you study for the knowledge. You study to understand the concepts and constructs. So you're not here to just pass a pub quiz and get a certification to say that you've done it, but because you actually understand the content. Because what you've got to remember is when you go to your professional career and you're in that role and you're in that seat, somebody asks you a question in relation to your job, you need to be able to answer that. And I can tell you what, no one has ever asked me a Network Plus question when I've been sitting there and doing my job. They've already asked me a scenario that relates to the company, that has an element of networking in, has an element of security in, and I've had to sum up all of my knowledge from these different areas to articulate into an answer to them. So make sure that you're being holistic and comprehensive in your studies, using platforms to use a practical element. You're going to places like Cyber Mental Dojo and you're finding a mentor to help you in your journey and give you the right direction. You're joining study groups to ask other people for their perspectives. You're being open-minded to different perspectives. You're not just challenging them, but you're challenging them rationally and logically. And you're looking to try and critically analyze news articles, information, to see things from different angles. Because not everything is 1 and 0. It's not all binary. There's always going to be different angles to everything, such as like malware analysis. There's going to be many different ways that you can unpack malware. And there's not always going to be a one-size-fits-all for it. So you need to learn the different ways that you can do it.
Yeah, one of the things I like about what you said, too, about learning the topic when you're trying to get the certification, because it's like if you rush through this and just do enough to pass the cert, how's that going to help you on your interview? Because if you go do the interview shortly after the exam, you may do well, but 6 months, a year later, you're not going to remember that stuff. And, it's just you got the certification, but then people are going to say, well, he's got the certifications, but he doesn't know anything.
I've been in interviews like that where somebody on paper, they looked amazing. They had all the certifications that I wanted that person to have. And in the interview, we're asking them basic questions around the topic that they should have known. And it was just, they completely bombed. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a confidence issue. A lot of them came in and they were pretty prim and proper, giving, really good answers, really good talk, really good introduction. But when it came to the questions, that was it, just drawn a blank. And it was like, I don't know whether it was a pressure, which it could have been a pressure scenario. But for me, it was like, you've studied enough that you could at least articulate something. I mean, at least tell me what the port is. I mean, asking questions like, what is DNS and what does DNS actually do? What does it achieve? They should be able to answer that. And once you struggle at that point with those certifications on your CV, you need to go back to the very beginning. You need to go back over it, because that's just gonna, I don't know if anyone listening is a Skyrim fan, but that's an arrow in your knee. Imagine you're an adventurer and you're going through to become this amazing cybersecurity professional. You've got all these certifications, you've got all these medals on your chest, but you haven't got the minerals to back it up, then it's not going to work in your favor.
Yeah, then not to mention once you get on the job and you've spent all this time to certify it, but you didn't learn it, and then now you got to go back and learn it over again or do a lot more research to get the answers.
Yeah, and if you're working under SLAs, you're going to feel the pressure.
Yeah, and I can imagine being a security operations center analyst too, because that's usually because something funny is going on. It's not, we're putting in a firewall and we've got time, we're not being pressured. So I can just imagine there's a lot of pressure in that role to figure out what's going on or investigate what happened. And
yeah, that's all there's SLAs, everything in security operations centers. And that's where a lot of burnout comes from, is the high pressure situations because of those SLAs, and they're here to stay. They're not going to go. So it is a high pressure environment, and you have to be able to work quickly, not just quickly, but accurately as well.
Yeah. One of the things that just crossed my mind too to discuss is, a lot of other areas if someone is going to be a pen tester, then they know there's specializations or other types of pen testing they can do. But, not everyone's as familiar with the security operations analyst, and that's one of the areas that's a good way to get into security. So what would be places that you could move to from security operations? What would that prepare you for if you're wanting to move on from that type of role?
So commonly people use security operations to go into pen testing, but there's very little translation. From defensive to offensive, there's very little translation there. I mean, yes, you have knowledge of different networks and different systems that they may use, but there's the approach to security or approach to cybersecurity as a concept is different. But from a security operations perspective, you can go into threat intelligence, you could go into CERT or IR, you can go into digital forensics, you could go into malware analysis. As a SOC analyst, you should have all of these skills at quite a low level already. But if you want to specialize, there are different avenues you can take. A lot of people become senior threat hunters. Now you're probably thinking, well, a SOC analyst must be a threat hunter anyway. There's a slight difference between the two. SOC analyst, you're going to be looking at these SIM tools, you're going to be looking for these alerts, you're going to be looking for probably ill behavior on that network. Whereas a threat hunter, you're spending your time looking at threat intelligence, trying to translate that into what you're trying to look for in the network, trying to look for that threat behavior before it becomes a problem. So you are essentially that SIM tool there at that point in time. You are the one that goes ahead and does all those correlations to try and find this activity. The biggest route that people take is IR, and that's a big field in itself. IR is a massive field in itself. The ability to respond to a critical attack that's caused massive impacts to a business and being able to restore those systems in a holistic but safe manner is a massive field in itself. And that's something that comes with about 3 to 4 years SOC experience. You're probably going to be looking at IR roles then if that's where you want to go. Or you can just go down the management route, which I'm doing at the moment. You've got your SOC lead, and you go to your SOC manager, your head of security operations. There's not really scope to become a CISO there. A CISO, from a head of security operations to a CISO, it's a very different route. You've got to learn all your GRC, you've got to learn how to talk to the business. So that's a different route altogether. A lot of people go, oh, I'm a SOC analyst now. I want to be a CISO in 10 years. I'm like, whoa, okay. You've got to learn your stuff first. So I had this discussion with someone saying, okay, I'm a SOC analyst, but I want to be a CISO. I said, right, first, let's just get your climbing boots on and let's get you start going up the mountain first before you get there, because there's a lot to learn. Even if you want to go pen tester, CISO, there's a lot to learn.
Yes, I agree.
There's many different. Yes, I was speaking to this security leader, and I said because he said, oh, you'd be good as a CISO, and I said, no, I wouldn't, trust me. And he's like, why? Talk to me. And I went, because honestly, I've looked at a job role of a CISO and I have no idea. That's why I'm doing stuff like CISM. I'm looking at risk management. I'm taking university courses at the moment to look at information security. And my mind is just like, I don't know any of this. I never would have been a CISO. I would have been there being like policy and just drawing stuff in paint saying, don't click stuff, and just giving it to people. Like, that's your security policy. Don't click stuff. Don't open stuff. It's just crazy different world, that.
So one of the things I was curious about, since you did a bit of time as a pen tester, did that help you in your security operations role?
Massively, 100%. When I mentioned before that translation doesn't exist from defense to offense, it still doesn't exist from offense to defense, but the knowledge of how those threats may materialize is so important. So, for example, let me just put it into a context that a learner could understand, is when you're going through Try Hack Me and you're doing these exploits, think to yourself, where could I see this exploit on a log? What log would I need to ingest into my SIM tool? Would I need to detect the potential materialization of this exploit? That's really powerful. If you can start seeing stuff like credential dumping, you know where to look, or account creation for persistence, and you know where to look, that's extremely powerful as a defensive analyst, because you know where to look for malicious activity. Instead of just looking for all these log files, you can build really accurate queries that are going to give you the information you need to know. So when you're doing stuff like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, try looking at it from a defensive perspective while you're doing it. So, okay, I've just done this exploit and I've got root. Where would I need to look to prove to somebody that that's happened? Let's just say that somebody's walked in the room and went, hey, my account's been compromised, prove it. And you can go, right, this is a log file because I've done this exploit and I know where you need to look because I've tested it in my home lab by ingesting the logs of my vulnerable machine to a SIM tool. I've done the exploit on the vulnerable machine and I've seen it on my SIM tool. This is where you need to look. That is a very, very powerful bit of knowledge. And having that is going to make not just investigations easier, but your life easier as a defensive analyst. While the concept of red and blue are very, very different in terms of how they apply to achieve the goal of security, there is knowledge translation from red to blue, blue to red. So it's important to have that touch of both. So if you are going to be doing blue, learn red. If you're going to be doing red, learn blue. Because if you're a pen tester, you want to know about what security controls they're using and what you need to bypass and what you need to hide from. And as a defensive analyst, you want to be looking at, well, where are they going to be using? What tools are they going to use? Where do I need to look? What tools create a lot of volumes? Because I'll tell you what, if you are a defensive security analyst and you can't detect somebody doing an nmap on your network, I mean, you've got problems. You've got some serious problems, because a lot of pen testers, they just slap T4 and everything. They want to get it done quickly. So you're going to see them. Not that you should be stopping pen testers if they're doing pen test, because it's not a very team engagement. So let the pen tester test. If you're a defensive analyst and you see a pen tester testing, don't network contain them, because you're going to get people breathing down your neck.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity, though, to see what that malicious traffic looks like, or that the nmap scans, the Nessus scans, and that sort of stuff to keep in mind in the future when you know there shouldn't be a pen test going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I appreciate you joining. This has been a great conversation. It was good to meet you virtually. I like what all that you're doing in the community, and keep up the awesome work. Thanks for being my guest.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me on. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.